All right, man, here we go.
Here we go. A bit of a holiday edition, I guess. As we're recording right now, we're both fat and happy after a little bit of a holiday breather. So I know you stuck to your diet entirely, right?
Oh my goodness. This will probably come out in a few weeks, so maybe it'll be, but it's December 27th right now. And I'll tell you what, I told you before we clicked on the camera, I was with my wife's, her parents and her couple sisters, and we all rented a house for a few days. And I'm usually, there's tasty stuff around as the holidays. Like I'll allow myself to some indulgences because it's the holidays, right? But I don't go like bonkers. I don't know what happened, man. I went bonkers. I don't know when.
Feet in, huh?
Dude, I don't know I can't tell you the last time I went that hard for that long. I don't know what it was. There was so much tasty stuff available all the time. And it was to the point where like after 3 days, somebody's like, hey, do you want a cookie? I'm like, I actually don't. Like, I feel awful. So it kind of reset me.
Excuse me. Yeah. Well, we didn't get too far off the rails. We had a prime rib for Christmas, which was pretty good. But there's a scratch bakery within walking distance of our house, which is always problems. And they do, holiday specials and stuff like that. And they make an amazing cheese Danish.
Oh, interesting. I've had one for years.
It's not one of those things that you kind of go for in your everyday kind of snack hounding. But we got some of those and they disappeared pretty quick.
I was going to say they did the trick well.
Yeah.
I'm eating clean again and feeling so good. Yep. Oh, I just feel like I'm covered in ooze. But anyway, this should be a fun one today. This hopefully will apply to people whether you are a very high level athlete or you're like most of us, you're a regular human trying your darn best. And this question was one that I saw out there on the social media as a topic, if you will. This individual, I know who he is, he'll remain nameless. He's a beast. He's one of the fittest human beings I know of that he's over in Europe that no one's ever heard of. And he's, you know the deal. There are some folks who are stronger. There are some folks who are better runners, but you're talking overall fitness, he is like up there. And he did Jackie recently. Beautiful, beautiful workout, right? Just an opportunity to cover yourself in kerosene and strike a match. And he did it. He's done it several times. And he did this last one in 6 minutes and 15 seconds, which if you look at btwb, that's a level 96. It's a phenomenal Jackie. I think it was a couple seconds, quote unquote, slower than his lifetime PR. Like lifetime PR was like a 6:13. This was a 6:15, right? And he was just, he's a normal human being with a range of emotions. So he had some comments like, man, like, I'm trying not to be down on myself, but like, I couldn't have pushed any harder. I don't know where I can squeeze anything else out of this workout. Like, I feel like I'm tapped out for what I can do. And it's kind of bumming me out, like to know that I can't do any better maybe ever in my life on this workout. And it's hard on me mentally, and just, I got to do some serious head games to like not let myself spiral down a hole. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting one. And so there, you could face that if you are you're Josh Bridges doing Fran. Let's assume he goes below parallel. You're not going to go any faster on that. So you could be an elite athlete and bump into the limits of a workout like that, or you could be like the rest of us. You're just trying your hardest in the gym, and you've done a workout a few times, and everything's going great, and you're on good programming and good sleep and good nutrition, and you just seem to, 22 rounds of Cindy is what you get. Like you're just not going to go beyond that. And so the question becomes, whether it's Jackie, Cindy, or whatever, let's say the next time that workout pops up in your training cycle, this person is like, is there value in me doing it? Should I do something else? Should I modify it in some way? What's the deal? So that's kind of the topic for today.
Yeah, and it's a great topic. And it is also nice to know that even somebody who's as accomplished as this gentleman is, you still struggle with some of these things mentally. I mean, either of those times is very enviable by, I think, anybody who's doing CrossFit in any capacity. And so to know that, like, yeah, even if you're on the top of the mountain, so to speak, it still can be difficult sometimes. I think that in itself is worth noting for people. You know, you don't ever get to this point where you're like, well, that's it, I've got it and I've solved it. It's like, no, it's a continual process. So acknowledging that, I think, is important right out the gate. But second of all, I think that this is a really interesting topic in the sense that if you look at it broadly, what it really comes down to is a discussion around training age, in my opinion, because when you start into something and you're into it for 6 months, there's going to be a different trajectory than when you're at the 1 year mark, than when you're at the 5 year mark, when you're at the 10 year mark, and so on. And that has nothing to do necessarily with your biological age, but it has everything to do with the training age that you have. And generally speaking, the greater your training age is, the longer it's going to take to see progression within a specific domain. That's generally the way it's going to go. And so because of that, the longer the interval you're going to need to see between repeat efforts of the same kind to see that manifest, right? So you can think about that kind of in the sporting realm. The 100-meter dash is something I come back to a lot when I'm talking about things in kind of a, an analogy format, because it's something that I think everybody can relate to. So you got that 100-meter dash. You take somebody who's at the top of their game. Usain Bolt is the name that I think everybody is associated with that race, at least in our generation. It doesn't take anybody with a real high understanding of strength and conditioning to know that his training is not running the 100-meter dash at all-out race pace on a regular basis. He's going to save those absolute uncorked, full-out race pace, trying to set a world record type of efforts, maybe a couple times a year, maybe.
Right.
And the rest of the time is set trying to prepare for that and understanding that, as deep as he is, as accomplished as he is, there's only so many of those efforts that are going to exist. And if you try to repeat them too often, you're going to have a terrible mindset because it's going to look like you're going backwards. And that's not necessarily the case. And so that's number one, is you got to think about the training age and what comes with that. It's going to take longer, generally speaking. It's going to take longer to see progress. And generally speaking, you're going to need more time between repeated efforts in order to really get a sense of where that is falling. So I want to start the conversation there.
I like that. And I would also say it might be useful for people to realize, we're not doing Jackie or fill in the blank on any workout. You're not doing Jackie to become a Jackie specialist. At least that's, exactly. My 2 cents on that. Jackie is something that fit into the overall architecture of what was going on, where you needed a chipper style, bigger chunks of work, 1,000-meter on the row, set of 50 thrusters. Yes, they're light, but it's still a set of 50, set of 30 pull-ups, one time through, light loading, barbells empty. And it's just a hold your hand as close to the flame as you possibly can. That's a unique training stimulus. There's multiple ways to get there, but Jackie could serve that one really well when you needed a monostructural weightlifting gymnastics sort of a deal. And so, if your goal was to just be a Jackie specialist, then there might be some things that you would go down, but that's not what we're talking about. It's just a training aid. Now, the fact that there's a clock associated with it, and if you've been doing CrossFit for 10 years, maybe you've done it 5 or 6 times and you've got a lot of data points, that can start to creep into your head a little bit. Again, if you've been in this game for a very long period of time and, you might not be able to squeak anything more out of that. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have value, because that workout, allowing you to express that level of intensity, chipper style and whatnot, it serves a function. It would be the same thing as like, if you do a 6x400-meter repeat day, that serves a particular function. And maybe you've been training for 15, 20 years. And you know what? It's been a long time since you've seen a lifetime PR because now you're 42. You started when you were 22. Does that mean the next time that 6x400-meter repeats pop up, you shouldn't do it because you're probably not going to set a lifetime PR? Like, absolutely not. Like, that's still such a potent and powerful and valuable day. It's like the same day if you're at that training cycle where, hey, father time waits for none of us, that you're never going to increase your 5x5 deadlift again. Does that mean you stop doing a 5x5 deadlift? Like, no. So there's the testing element, right? This training versus testing. It can be so easy as CrossFitters to consider every workout as a test that I have to compare against every data point, compared to it's a training day, looking at the block of training, what serves me well today is a chipper style, very lightweight, needed to get on the rower, needed big chunks of work, needed something in that, 6 to 12 minute time domain. Boom, there's Jackie. And whether it's a PR or not is one thing, but it's the puzzle piece that fit beautifully on that day.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. If you reframe it as a training session, I think the utility is inarguable in that regard. I also think that if you're somebody who is, needing that kind of comparison from a past effort, you've got to open that aperture just a little bit wider from the absolutism of it has to be better or it's a failed effort. I would say, what were the exact times? They were like within 3 seconds of each other?
Something like that. I mean,
okay. So let's say
very close.
For argument's sake, it was a 3 second differential. The time before was 3 seconds faster than the most recent time. Well, I'm here to tell you that is within enough of a threshold that I would call it a wash. Right. I get it. Yeah. I get it. Objectively, it's a little slower, but
yes.
Let's be honest about it. That is basically, for all intents and purposes, the same performance. And so I don't know what the interval was between that last performance and this performance, but to be able to maintain that basically as a wash, I mean, that's pretty good. And I would say that's a pretty good indicator that, hey man, you're hanging on to some pretty serious fitness, because that is a crazy time for that particular workout. So even viewed from that lens, I think, you can't look at this as like, oh, objectively it was slower, therefore something's wrong with my training. I will say, though, to play devil's advocate to some degree to what you're saying, I completely am on board with this idea of, hey, it fits the bill as a great chipper style training with big blocks of work. Can I still do that? Is that still valuable? Yes. However, I would say that if you've kind of maxed out that particular workout, what may be more useful, especially if we're dealing with somebody that knows it's going to be a bit of a head game if they don't PR, is to choose something that's not Jackie. Choose something that's close, that still checks all those boxes, but allows for that headspace to attack something fresh and not have to be wrapped up in, okay, is this going to result in a lifetime PR or not? And I think there's real value in that. And that kind of echoes to, some other approaches within the strength and conditioning world out there. You look at the Louis Simmons conjugate style systems, and they are doing all these wacky lifts all year round. And I believe that a big part of that is because they're always setting, quote, PRs with something that they may not have done in the past. Mentally, it always feels more like a win than it does anything else. And that helps build momentum towards a greater training goal. And so I do think there's utility there too. So, my slight devil's advocate is that, yep, still worthwhile, still a brick in the wall. However, I think that you could achieve that same effect with something that was, close to Jackie, but not Jackie, and save yourself the heartache of feeling like you really have to max it out.
I was going to say, I don't even feel it's a devil's advocate, to be quite honest with you, because there's two parts to it. I say this all the time, right? Like, strength and conditioning is easy. People are hard, right? I mean, you have to cater to both. I mean, we're in a people business, right? And so play with, like, you should be, you're a sovereign, free, autonomous citizen. Like, you're free to play with these things if you have a decent understanding of your fitness IQ is decent enough to play with these things. Like, look, okay, let's say that you're this individual, Jackie comes up and you're like, it's been 6 months. You're like, I don't know if I want to do this. Hey, do Jackie backwards. Do 30 pull-ups, 50 thrusters, and ending with a 1,000-meter row sounds terrible to me. But that's, even though those movements are the same, if you do it backwards, it is a different workout. Even if it's close, you cannot compare your time. You didn't do it the exact same. Or I'll tell you what, take that 1,000-meter row and chop it up. Do a 500, 50 thrusters, 30 pull-ups, and end with a 500. Or do any combination of those things. I don't think that you have to make Jackie any harder, but if it helps you between the ears, don't do it with an empty barbell. I mean, don't make it super heavy. Maybe put 65 pounds on the bar. Different workout. Maybe keep the barbell empty And if you're a beast, this time it's chest to bar pull-ups instead of like these little slight tweaks and differences are really close to what the stimulus is, but they are different. So it will be, like you're saying, with all these things at Westside, it will be a new PR, even if it's super close. Like play with these things. Or, the 1,000-meter row is a little bit close to an 800-meter run. Do an 800-meter run. Yes, you won't have as much interference with the legs. I get it, but it's still like you're going to be okay. Fitness is going to be achieved. And so it's kind of limitless if you give yourself that, you authorize yourself to have that creative freedom. You could do a slightly different version of Jackie every time it popped up, never have a repeat, preserve the training stimulus, and hopefully be very happy between the ears.
Yeah, for sure. And, I'll give you one more angle on that, and that is my personal angle. So what we've been kind of talking about, in my opinion, is more of a hypothetical around somebody who's like dedicated. They're training, 5-6 days a week. They've been doing that for years. Everything's going the way it's supposed to. I'll give you the Adrian Bosman personal reality, which is, like I'm not at my most disciplined. I haven't been for some time. I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? Like I'm getting in when I should. I'm not at my fittest. There's no argument there, but I'm doing fine, and there's definitely a lot less kind of diligence than there has been at other points in my life. No harm, no foul. That being said, what I'm getting at is that the days that I am training are fewer and further between. And so the opportunities that I have to work on things that I want to be doing inside the gym are less. And so under those circumstances, if this were me personally, and I had a workout that I knew was in my wheelhouse, and I knew I was going to be like within that, 2 to 3 second threshold,
right?
I am absolutely going to sidestep that for something else because I've got more limited opportunities to train. And so I'm going to pick something where there's more benefit to my overall conditioning and my overall training than there is to something that I'm already really, really close to. So I think that's another question in the conversation is like, okay, what are you doing? How often are you doing it? What opportunities do you have to train? And if there's an abundance of that, you're getting in all the time, hey, yeah, go for it. If it's less so, well, then maybe you should be a little bit more selective about which of those things you really have to come back to the well on.
And, you said something like this before, again, we're giving a whole bunch of different options, right? So there's so many different personality types out there that if we give you 10 different option types, there's some that people will gravitate towards, right? Hey, I'm going to be totally something different. I'm going to do a slight modification. I'm going to do it backwards. Like whatever works for you. I'm going to run instead of row. Something else that you could do, I think you mentioned this with like certain barbell workouts that were, quick singles is your fastest time. You're like, well, screw it. Tell yourself you have to do touch and go fives and just see what happens. Like you're going to be okay. And so for this individual, I know that they rowed a 3:30 for the 1,000-meter row. And then they did the next two things unbroken. You know what? And you're probably rowing a 3:30 because you feel like if you row any quicker, it will have a negative effect on those other things. Allow yourself.
Guess what, cowboy?
Allow yourself to row a 3:20, or something like that, and let it crash and burn. And you have to, for the first time in your life, you set the thruster barbell down twice and you can't believe it. Like that's okay. Like that's a cool chance to take, and allow yourself that chance. So there's a whole lot of ways to do this. And there's the emotionless thing, which is like, yes, it still has training value, even if you don't PR. And then there's the human emotion. Let's find a way that you actually enjoy walking into the gym, and we can do both. And I reached out for this topic to your friend of mine, friend of the program, Dan Bailey, who probably has
a great human being,
a great man,
just a stellar guy.
And my question for him was like, does grace have any training value for you anymore? I mean, talk about somebody bumping into the limits of a workout. I think he did it in like 61 or 62 seconds. I mean, you're kidding me? And I was like, you're so fast at that thing. Like, I think you did it darn near unbroken. Or maybe you didn't let it go at all. Like, if grace comes up, do you have to bump it up? And he just started chuckling. He's like, oh no, grace is still as punchy and miserable as it needs to be. Like, there's no, he's like, now I'll do other things. He goes, but I'm not shortchanged when I do grace. And he had an interesting thing. He's like, I can make grace heavier. He goes, and of course I would, prefer that. He's like, but some of those things where you can actually go to your limits, you might not PR, but you can actually bump into your limits. He goes, there's something about that. And I liked how he said this. He goes, it it keeps you being a dangerous human being. Like if you allow yourself to just stand near that fire, you know, like he goes heavier, Grace is going to get broken up, but he walks in how it is. And he's like, oof, we're going to dance with the devil today. You know, that's just a different experience. And so there's so many different facets and aspects to training for increasing what's going on inside your body, and then what you have to do to get your head right to walk into the gym. And there's no right or wrong answer. Hopefully just all of these different options, again, help keep a smile on your face training, because then the most important thing is that no matter what you do, you keep walking into the darn gym, because when that stops, things are going in a bad direction.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, that's really the name of the game if you're looking at longevity. And one more reason that it's kind of, a bit of a bummer that we're talking about something that is, anybody would die for that time. That's an amazing thing to have either one of those times on that workout. And to think that, he's stepping away from that second effort, being disheartened by it is, I mean, I'm not going to say it's absurd. Like, I get it. And I totally understand, that feeling of regression, no matter how small, it can be disheartening. Absolutely. But when you take a step back and you think about, just where that sits within the realm of possibility and times, like, people would be over the moon to be anywhere close to that. And so, you can't lose sight of that either. And to me, maybe that even heightens it even more. It's like, man, if you have somebody that's doing that well, that is disheartened by that effort, we definitely have to figure out a way that doesn't happen in the future, because nobody should be disappointed with something like that.
Out of total, I actually don't think I have any more on the topic. I don't know if you do, but out of, what would you say, whether you're bumping into, a level 96 or whatnot, is your, in your prime, okay, I'm going to give you in your prime, what was your best workout that you're like, you know what, if I pull this one out, I can't say I'm going to beat all comers, but it's my best shot. What was your best workout?
That's a great question. Let me think, at my best,
there's just so many.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was proud when I got a sub 3 Fran. I remember the best Fran I ever did was a 247. I was pretty happy about that. And it, actually, I guess it's kind of related. Once I got sub 3, I was like, I'm never doing it again. Right. So there you go. That's my personal stance. But I think if I had to, be completely honest about it, and it's not the one that I'd want to be like the one, but in my prime, Cindy was my jam.
Really?
I could crush it. Like, I'm not talking Spieler 30 plus rounds, but I could do a high 20s Cindy.
That's
and
legit.
Just be working through it and know that, like, it was legit. All the reps were good, and it wasn't like destroying me to do that kind of work. That I was pretty proud of that back in the day.
When you would get something in the high 20s, did you ever have to, or at what point do you remember when you would have to break the push-ups?
Well, no, I mean, I think at that point I was not, or it was deep.
That's
it was like the last,
man.
It was like the last 5 minutes, Like, I think if memory serves, I have to go look it up. I think the best I ever did was like 28 rounds. And
man.
But, I'm 40 now. We're talking, I was 25 at the time. And, that was all I was really interested in, was stuff like that. So
understood. Now you got some other interests. Well, I hope that this helps that individual.
Wait. What about you? Hold on. You can't escape that easily. Let's turn the tables here.
In quote unquote my prime, it was Fran. Yeah, Fran. That was definitely it. It was just the right loading, just the right rep range, descending reps. It was just short enough that I could stay ahead of the wave of pain, and it just all worked out. Yep, that was it. It was, but I hated it every single solitary day. And kind of like this individual, for me personally, my last few Frans were all quote unquote fast, but they were within a few seconds of each other, and they all came down to, like, I had to walk an extra step or two for the bar. So it's kind of like, I don't know how I can get myself better at this workout, but I never questioned the training stimulus. I'll tell you that, because I was like down on the ground for 15 minutes afterwards, even if it was quote unquote 5 seconds off my PR, like, it delivered the goods. And so there was that, that kind of thing going on there as well. But
man, hold on. I got 2 more bubbling up now.
Really? Okay. What do you got?
So now that we're talking about it, the other, And
I thought you were going to say something with overhead squats.
Well, no, I have to put the caveat on this. This was back in the day when, let's just say, training practices have evolved.
Okay.
And
Yeah, sure.
one of my all-time best workouts used to be old school Fight Gone Bad with rebounding box jumps and gaming it a little bit where you didn't have a full gym's worth of equipment. So you're like, okay, Pat, you're going to start here and I'm going to start here. I'll start on the push press.
On the push press.
And I'm going to get 40 or 50 reps right out the gate. And then I'm going to rebound the hell out of my box jumps. And, you know, I'm going to get a over 400 score. So that was, I was proud of that. Looking back on it though, I'm like, man, I would not do that again. It's pretty rough on the old tendons a little bit there.
That's a dirty workout.
Yeah. And one that to this day, I still have a decent score. And like you said, I can kind of ride the wave on this one just enough, is the Chief. I love that workout. One of my favorites. And I can still throw down a pretty decent Chief. So
the Chief is just one of those ones too. It ticks so many great boxes, right? Like it's sneaky. By the end of it, you get in more volume than you realize, but all the reps are manageable and you keep going. You get just enough rest to like not want to jump in front of a bus and keep going. And like it's the Chief is one of those ones where I feel like you could program that every 2 weeks in the gym and be happy. Like people just love the Chief, man. They really do.
One. Yeah, stroke of genius.
It's a good one for sure.
Yep.
Well, all right. Like I was saying, I hope this serves the athlete who maybe you're just such a darn beast that you're bumping into the limits of human performance, or even if you're like what most of us are, mere mortals, and you've just been training for a while and, you're not getting those beginner or even intermediate gains anymore. You've been doing this for 10, 12, 15 years. We all bump into our limits at one point in time, and then we have to figure out how to keep walking into the gym by either modifying something, representing the training stimulus as best as we can. Like you're saying, giving yourself authorization to just swap it out for something. All of those are good things. Like those all keep you walking into the gym, so they all have value. If you have a question about this particular topic or comments about this topic, find them on the btwb YouTube channel. Let us know what you think. If you've faced this in your life, one of your clients' lives, we'd love to hear about it. Of course, go to verynotRandom.com and help support the show. We appreciate you. And for Adrian Bosman, I'm Pat Sherwood, and I'll see you next time.